Welcome to another edition of Anglican Unscripted. This is episode 923. I'm Kevin Kallsen.
I'm George Conger. Today is July 15th, 2025.
All right, welcome to another episode of Anglican Unscripted, and we hope this shows everything you want out of a show. Now, I need to let you know up front, I see sometimes in the comment section, you guys forgot to cover this, you didn't cover this, what about this? From time to time, once or twice a month, we miss a story that's out there, or we forget to give you an update. Here's where you, as an audience member, can help participate. Please send emails with show ideas to AnglicanTV@gmail.com, and it'll keep us posted as to what's going on, because you may not know this, but George is a full-time priest, and full-time priests know that that's not 40 hours, that's 60, and then he does Anglican Unscripted, and then he's the senior editor for Anglican.inc, the internationally famous website providing Anglican news around the world, and he's a husband and a father, and okay, what's my excuse? I'm slightly retired. That's it. So it would really behoove us if you could help us by sending us story ideas so that we don't have things fall behind the cracks. Like our 7th and 8th story today, we'll talk about stuff that fell behind the cracks. Anything else? Yes, please like, share, subscribe, comment, do all the things you do to be a great audience member on Anglican Unscripted. George, how are you this week?
It's always something new in parish life. After 30 years, I'm surprised this has happened before, but...
has not happened before.
Has not happened before.
Yeah.
But we're dealing with an unplanned pregnancy. One of our good girls, my wife's assistant in the nursery for a number of years, went off to college, has a successful career, moved to the big city, and she is going to have a baby. Her boyfriend has run out on her, wants nothing to do, won't get married, won't do anything like that. Good news is she's decided to keep the child, is going to come home. And
the great news is she's decided, wow. Yeah. And
Kevin, you and I were talking before the show about the change in our culture. We can really start to see it. There's so much that is wrong with our culture. We start talking about young men, and we have plenty to say what's wrong with them. But the default position when you and I were young, if a career woman had an unplanned pregnancy, the default option was she's going to have an abortion. Mm-hmm. Today, the default option is I'm going to keep this child, and I'm going to be a mother. I'm going to keep my career. My parents are going to step up. The church is going to step up. And I think the first thing that, when I say it's the first time, people have always had babies, but it's the first time that we're like, how is the church collectively going to basically be there for this mother and her child for the long term? As I say, you learn something new every time.
You do. I mean, people, including George and Kevin and everybody I ever know, make mistakes and have made poor decisions. And sometimes you make a poor decision and it produces life. What are you going to do now with that decision? And we went through that Murphy Brown phase where you can't be a professional woman without having a child, or you can't be a professional mother without being a professional woman and having a career. And I think we need a shake-up now in understanding that we can't throw away our pure gender identity roles, something that this society has done successfully in throwing them away. And hopefully we can, under the next generation, rediscover gender roles and where we are in them. You know?
And in the short term, how we can walk alongside people with love and in love. And the times it's way past the time for anybody to get out their finger and start wagging it at somebody for having made a mistake. That's not where we are today.
No.
But how do we go forward, and how do we seek and find God's will in all this stuff? Interesting times.
It is interesting times. Another hot, humid day here in Southern Maryland. Oh boy, it's basically like living in Miami for the month of July, because in August it gets all better here. August is not so much better in Miami, so there's hope down the road. I hope you guys got to watch last week's episode with Jeff Walton. We went over some of the ACNA's numbers that they put out on the province and the diocese, and it was pretty encouraging to watch that. George and I sometimes are going bald for the lack of information that comes out of the ACNA, but it was good to shake out Jeff for the numbers. We have stories and stories and stories, 7 or 8 if we get to them all. Let's talk first about the Church of Nigeria is going to ban politicians and politics from the pulpit. Now, I need to back up here. I have experienced African politics in the pulpit because I live streamed John Guernsey's consecration. I live streamed Atwood's consecration, and who's the other guy who was there? I've live streamed Americans being consecrated in Africa, and part of the procedures and what happens during the consecration is politicians show up that day to address the crowd, because the crowd has not gathered in this small city or hamlet or town in a year. And this politician now has an opportunity to endorse the new bishop, but also give a political speech. And the John Guernsey consecration was probably 6 hours. The Atwood one was probably 3 hours. And the normal service itself is 90 minutes. The rest was filled with politicians. I have great appreciation for the Church of Nigeria saying no more. The pulpit is for the church, not for the politicians.
Yeah, this was prompted by the governor of Abuja State, the Capital Territory, spoke at a church proceeding, just as you described it, but he went off and denounced by name the leader of the opposition party. And the bishops at the Episcopal gathering of the Church of Nigeria that immediately followed this, the bishop said, look, we can't have this anymore. First off, if you're not a priest and you're going to be up at the pulpit and you want to say something, you've got to clear it ahead of time. So if you want to get up and talk about mosquito nets and global warming or issues, okay. But if you're going to talk about vote for X, not for Y, or so-and-so is a monster and our guy is the only guy, that's not allowed. Mm-hmm. Keeping partisan politics out of the pulpit. And they're doing this not just for political reasons, because for theological reasons. Why has God gathered his people together in this building? It is to give him worship and glory and praise and honor. And if the church allows that to be overtaken by the world, by political leaders, then you're doing a disservice to God, and you're doing an injustice to the people who come hear the word of God. So this follows the U.S., the IRS, allowing Christian groups to get into politics. And I have to say, I'm actually proud of some Episcopal bishops, Kristen White of Southern Ohio, Paulson Reed of Oklahoma, both putting out letters to their clergy saying, even though the IRS said it's okay, don't you dare do this. It's one thing to talk about issues, moral issues,
sure,
abortion, wherever you are on the thing. It's completely different to be like these Jesse Jackson in the black churches, or Joe Biden, going in and getting political endorsements. And if you do that in those dioceses, you're going to hit it from the bishop.
I would say yes and no. I know a certain bishop here in Washington of the Episcopal Church who is deep into politics and has used the pulpit for politics. I know just because of my time in church journalism here, other bishops and priests around the country here in the Episcopal Church, inside and outside of TEC and the ACNA, who have used the pulpit to endorse a candidate or endorse a political idea beyond the realm of the gospel.
Marion Edgar Buddy, the Bishop of Washington, is notorious not only for being a lightweight, but for using the pulpit for partisan purposes. Mm-hmm. Gene Robinson, when he was Bishop of New Hampshire, was notable for a lot of stuff he did, but he also was the only bishop, I think at the time, Obama's first election, who actively told the people to vote for Barack Obama.
Sure. Yeah.
Which was a big no-no. I mean, it's one thing to say, I support X, Y, and Z. It's another thing to say, vote for the candidate who supports X, Y, and Z.
Well, you say it's a big no-no. I don't see any IRS enforcement of this rule up till now that garnered around a liberal candidate. If you wanted to endorse Bill Clinton, Obama, Hillary, the saint, you were allowed to.
Yeah, it was used as a weapon against the Jerry Falwell moral majority types, the Protestant megachurches, who would sort of rally troops around to vote, because evangelicals have a very low voter rate. They are not engaged politically, a great many of them. And when people, and we're going to talk about some evangelicals later who just died, would seek to rally people, the IRS said, no, you're going too far. But they would do it only on the right, not the left.
Sure. Now, I want to back up and be honest here. I've been in the Episcopal Church since 1989. Never have I ever been told by a rector who they were voting for. So, I choose good churches. Obviously, but that's 5 different priests since 1993 or 1989. And not one of them has ever revealed who they were going to vote for or who they did vote for in the pulpit or out of the pulpit. I certainly have my suspicions, but they did not engage politics in that shape or form. They engaged politics in the topic, not the people.
Good for them. You were lucky, because there's some real stinkers out there, Kevin.
There are.
There's some real stinkers who see the collar. They're frustrated politicians.
They are.
And they see the collar, this thing, as their ticket to get people to listen to them.
Well, there's a very famous Anglican virtue signaler who is once in a while writes a column for the New York Times. And last week's column was, "Are evangelicals or Christians sick of Trump yet?" And as soon as the news came out about this IRS rule, he posted on Facebook that, of course, he would never use the pulpit for politics. I'm a little dubious, but I don't think he's a stinker, but I think there's just people who can't miss the opportunity to put down a politician they disagree with.
Gavin Ashenden once made a comment when he was part of when we had a trio.
Sure.
Before the poor man lost his marbles and something happened to him.
Oh, stop.
Was it Scientology or Satan?
No, yeah, who knows?
No, we're teasing, of course.
Yeah, of course.
But he had a point that the more politics you preach, the more political a priest you are, the less spiritual a priest you are.
Yep, he's
There's
right.
a ratio, an inverse relationship. And I think he's absolutely right.
All right, so let's talk about the denominations that have almost destroyed themselves going into politics from the pulpit, George.
Oh, if any, this may be ancient history like the Greeks and the Romans for many of our viewers, but if you're an old fart like me, you'll remember the bad old days in the 70s and 80s, especially in Central America with the Sandinistas. And the Catholic Church in Central America was nearly destroyed by the liberation theology, communal based communities, and having priests so heavily engaged in politics that they were divorced from a Christian reality. Nicaragua, which was 91% Catholic at one point in the early 70s, is now, I believe it's less than 50% Catholic.
Yeah.
It's not that they're atheists, but people have left the church en masse. And one of the things John Paul II had to fight was the infiltration of Marxism, liberation theology in the clergy. At one point, there were 5, don't think they were all Jesuits, but many of them were Jesuits in the government of the communist Sandinista government, and that, proclaiming not Jesus Christ but Karl Marx. The logical flow of priests in the pulpit is what we saw happen in Nicaragua. Eventually, if you want to read the blow by blow, read Malachi Martin's book, The Jesuits, about how it took years for John Paul II to purge the Jesuit order and the Catholic Church in that part of the world, basically of wolves in sheep's clothing.
Yeah. Well, they also had the problem, the priests then were very political, but they were also socialist, and communist. They were not there just to enforce the gospel. They were there to help enforce the government. And it became very shameful.
That's where this leads. Where this leads.
Mm-hmm. All right, I think we covered that topic pretty closely to every jot and tittle. Let's move on. We have some news from the Church of England General Synod, which has met. Why would I say meet? Has met this week, and they've adopted an abuse redress system where they think they're going to dole out £150 million to the victims. It's going to be a complicated dole out. Let's talk about how that works, George. And who are the victims? Let's start there.
Victims of abuse at the hands of clergy, church workers within the Church of England, people who had positions of responsibility, lay and ordained. From the John Smythes on down to the pervert priest at the corner parish. This has been an ongoing crisis, and as true to form, it's been the cover-up that has forced out Justin Welby and has so damaged Cottrell and so many other people. Last week we were talking about Martin Snow, the Bishop of Leicester's chances at Canterbury have effectively been torpedoed by his mishandling of abuse complaints. Well, finally the Church of England is going to bite the bullet and compensate the victims. And the victims of physical abuse, spiritual abuse, financial abuse, bullying, basically over things that they're going to make things right. But they've adopted a very complicated 4-step process. First is, first you have to show that there's been abuse. Then that you're in step 1, and then you're sort of the amount of your compensation ranges from £5,000 to over £660,000 based upon severity and this and that. Then there's a multiplier effect of how long and how bad it was, and if the church ignored you. Then there's additional multipliers. There are 4 stages. So you may start off with £100,000 and it gets multiplied, then it gets doubled, and then it gets doubled again for specific circumstances. The bishop knew about it, did nothing, or this took place over 8 years, or you have been so screwed up that you've been in psychotherapy for 25 years after this happened. All this is taken into account. It's going to be run by an outside agency, so that and independent, and they're going to be independent assessors. So it's not the church grading its own homework. And the church commissioners will fund this with £150 million. So good news that they're finally taking care of this. It was a near unanimous vote, 1 or 2 abstentions. I don't think anybody voted against it. This happened yesterday in New York at the final day of the General Synod meeting. Problem is that abuse lawyers are saying £150 million, you guys, that's just the appetizer. Because what's going to happen is people are not going to come out of the woodwork. And, one abuse law firm put out a little statement saying it's going to be $500 million before we get done with this. So that, and $150 million is what some American Catholic dioceses have had to pay.
I was going to say, no, if not more. if
And
you go back just a little bit in time to when the Roman Catholics had to deal with this, they were quick to say every church owns its church. It's not owned by the diocese. All assets are dispersed. We have nothing, so don't come after us. The Church of England has some money, George.
I don't want to gainsay what they did. They took a step in the right direction after kicking and screaming and denying for years that this is a problem. Right. It was localized. It was just a few bad apples. And the reality was that there was an old boy system of cover-up, denial, of obfuscation, of getting a file and oops, it got wet in the floods and we can't remember what you said. That was one of John Sentamu's, things where the palace in York, the river overflowed and all the files got wet. And sorry, we can't help you anymore because your paperwork's all been stuck together. So good news, but I just maybe people would be satisfied with less money than the Americans or other would be. But I just don't see this being capped at 150 million.
Imagine going back in time 30 years ago and setting up an accountability system that worked. This would have cost them nothing. They could have dealt with each of these as they occurred with the appropriate punishment, the appropriate recompense for the victims, and there wouldn't be 150 million pounds or 500 million pounds, maybe £1 billion spent on cover-ups.
I remember the bad old days of the Catholic abuse scandal. There were times, I think we were up north at the time, when if I wore a collar in public, that people would clutch their children because all you heard was the stories about the pervert clergy. So what's going to happen? I think the Church of England needs to be aware that it's only going to get louder and noisier. This will not make it go away. And yes, the victims will be abused, but it's the Church of England's reputation. They need to start doing reputation management now, because all of these stories are going to come out of the woodwork now that there's money to be had.
Good. We need to have it open and transparent so it does not happen again. So help us God. Let's move on to our next story. We've covered, at least in the last year, Syria, Pakistan, Turkey, and some other countries who are taking Christian church property and converting it to mosque or Muslim facilities. The next story we have is Turkey is going to convert the Armenian Cathedral into a mosque. George.
This is a story that sort of came sideways out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. Kevin, you actually forwarded to me a Gateway Pundit story, I think. Yep. It really was not in the mainstream press. The historic Armenian cathedral, built in the 8th or 9th century, it's the middle of nowhere because the Turks killed all the Armenians in that part of Armenia. It's in these fields. It's an ancient monument. It is being rebuilt by the Turkish government, restored. And the Turkish government has announced it's not going to be a mosque. Because they said, well, in the 11th century, when the Seljuk Turks conquered that part of Armenia, they turned it into a mosque. Well, the Armenians pushed the Turks out again, and it was a church it was a mosque for 5 or 10 years, and a church for over 1,000 years. And until the most recent earthquake, it was still a consecrated church property. Well, under the Erdogan government, now that their government is using state money to fix it up, that makes it a mosque. Now, this is the same government that turned Hagia Sophia from a museum, which had been so designated by Ataturk after the First World War, changing it from a mosque back into a museum. Now, the Turks are doing this to one of the symbols of Armenian Christianity. Mm-hmm. And it's just symptomatic of the current Turkish regime's Islamist mindset of persecution of Christians, persecution of minorities like the Kurds and the Armenians and the Syrians and other people. And to be frank, except for the Armenian church in Armenia itself and the ecumenical patriarch in Istanbul, nobody's really saying much about this.
Yeah.
It's almost becoming a story. I hate to say this, but it's becoming like Indian corruption or Christian persecution in Nigeria. You could run a story like this each week, and people don't care anymore.
Well, George, I'll take it a step further. It's like a European Islamic story in the immigration realm. It's just hidden. Whatever bad news immigration has brought Europe, they hide it in the news. Just not there. Disappeared. What are you talking about? And that's where we are now with the Turkish government and others taking on old church properties. All right, a long-standing story we've done here on Anglican Unscripted. Bishop Ruch is on trial this week. It began yesterday, and we have some stuff to say. And let's talk a little bit about having a trial behind closed doors.
Yeah, there's Stuart Ruch.
Yeah, Stuart. Yeah.
I went to college with Dave Ruch, which is spelled the same way as Ruch, so I get the names mixed up.
Yeah.
The trial began yesterday, and the trial is essentially for misconduct for covering up and not fully acting responsibly when you had an abuser in your diocese. It was a lay minister. Now, there's been an organization called ACNA 2, T-O-O, which plays off the Me Too era. And they have been accusing the ACNA of cover-up, obfuscation, of not fully wanting to investigate this. And finally, Ruch's trial is beginning, and the ACNA announces it's going to be closed to everybody. That includes the 4 people who've brought presentments, lay people brought presentments against Ruch, the complainants. Now, I can see the point of keeping an abuse trial closed, just as there's some portions of, say, rape trials or abuse trials in the civil courts that are closed. But it's just such a bad look for the ACNA to ban the press from abuse proceedings when part of the issue is lack of transparency.
Yeah, stuff like this drives me crazy. I have my own thoughts about whether I think Ruch is guilty of these charges. I have my own thoughts about procedures in this and protecting the victims. We certainly in the 1990s here in America had our famous blue dot trial where we hide the victim behind a blue dot. How can we best serve justice and the victim and have a good trial? And I see the difficulty in that, but I would say it would be very beneficial to the ACNA to let all future bishops know that these trials will be public. And you need to know that we are going to hold you fully accountable, and people are going to know if you did something stupid, wrong, or sinful. You know.
And it's part of a wider pattern we've seen lately in the ACNA of lack of transparency. Nothing was televised or broadcast or simulcast from the recent council meeting. Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't closed to the press. We were invited to it, but they did not. Yeah.
But trotting off to Latrobe, Pennsylvania, or Trinity Seminary in this day and age for a 4 or 5 day meeting is just not how the world works, especially when you've gotten people used to being able to watch it online. Jeff Walton's just released some statistics on the ACNA diocese and everything. Well, Jeff's a member of the I think provincial council, and he got that not because he's a press person, but because he's a person of consequence. Mm-hmm. Why are they not releasing this information? The ACNA right now has the press operations of a middling to small parish with a paranoid rector. It's really bad. And therefore, you look at the ACNA, nobody's going to believe the truth of the outcome because they can't see it for themselves. Mm-hmm. I like Stuart Ruch. I think he's a great guy. Yeah. So I'm inclined to believe that he's not guilty. Mm-hmm. There are those who think that he's a monster for what he did or didn't do. Mm-hmm. This trial will not change any minds because the ability to see what's been happening has been closed, and we'll get some mealy-mouthed, end of the day statement that will not serve the truth, serve God, or serve the defendants or the
victims
or the complainants.
Yeah.
Really, this is managerialism at its worst. And if the ACNA wants to become the Episcopal Church, they're just taking major steps in the last year or two towards that. Now, it's not too late, but personnel is policy.
Yes, it is.
When you get rid of top flight communication people and don't replace them, what you're essentially saying is this is not important, and so therefore, screw you, Kevin and George, and anybody who's listening. It's our show. You're not allowed to participate. Well, that's what Chuck Murphy said to us 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Hey, but we're still here doing this.
We're still here. We're here for the long haul. 923 episodes. Maybe we'll pull out 924. Don't know. But there's that reality that a church's success is not just found on what it preaches, but what it shows, what it indicates, and what it demonstrates. And if you can demonstrate the gospel in full openness, you will have so much more clout in the opinion of the people. And here you have voices like the ACNA too that are going to be very disappointed and will always call into suspect how you conduct your trials. If there was foreknowledge from this moment forward, all ACNA bishop trials will be conducted fully open, except we will hide the victim's face and name.
Or make, you and I have been to international Anglican gatherings where we've been told, this is what's embargoed. Mm-hmm. You cannot, you can watch as we make this final document, but don't you dare release parts of it until it's all done. Because if you do, out the door you go and you can't see the rest of it. There's very easy ways to ensure that you have, secrecy where it needs to be. Mm-hmm. But when you have this heavy-handed bullying tactics, bullying the press, keeping them out of things, I'm sorry, that's second tier, low rent stuff.
Yeah, I don't. ACNA, please get a comms guy, gal, whatever you need to do. Press should not have to be seeking information. You should be able to provide the press the information, and that's such a better way to communicate. Let's talk about last week. We lost Jimmy Swaggart, famed televangelist from the 80s, late 70s, 90s. After his fall, he continued, and kind of a follow-up at the same time to Jim and Tammy and some other televangelists who were going through some spectacular, non-transparent issues. So let's talk a little bit about Jimmy Swaggart and his ministry in fall, George.
I can remember watching him on UHF. Do you remember those channels?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
247, there he is.
in the 70s, and he really was one of the first televangelists who caught on nationally. And he really he was charismatic. He really, I think he was a cousin of
Jerry Lee
Lewis. I mean, yeah, he had the showmanship of his cousin Jerry Lee Lewis, the rock star.
Yeah.
His fall was that evidently he frequented prostitutes or something and was found out, and he did a tearful, sinful apology, but his ministry basically blew up after that because he was a really works righteousness person. I mean, you gotta live a good life. If Satan's trying to tempt you, you can't, and he was shown up to be a hypocrite.
Well, we say hypocrite. He would not let himself be held accountable. Sorry if there's a plane or helicopter, some attack going on outside here. Sorry about that. But Jimmy Swaggart's fall was not just his sin. It was that after he fell, he would still not let himself be held accountable by his church. And I forget what denomination it was at the time. But there is the biggest problem. If you're not going to be held accountable, and I say this because I have 7,000 clergy people hold me accountable every week. Thank you guys out there in Anglican Unscripted viewership. But if you're not going to be held accountable, you will destroy your life and possibly others. Yeah.
Now, I've not followed him for 20, 30 years, and he may have gotten right with God and have had a wholesome, wonderful ministry since then. But I had to say all I can really remember are the scandals. But last night we lost another, I would say great, as Jimmy Swaggart was great, televangelist, John MacArthur, from California.
Yeah.
And I was surprised to read that there are people criticizing him for being a bit of a control freak and everything. Well, I don't know anything about his personal life, but I know his preaching I really enjoyed.
Sure.
Very sound.
Well, to be quite honest, and I just say this as a lifetime in business, you run into personality quirks of successful businesses and churches. And some of those can be control freaks. Some of those are the miserable Steve Jobs of the world. Some of those are the Bill Gates of the world. And some of those are...
This Donald fellow.
Donald, what's his... I don't know.
What's his name? What's his name?
Talk about personality quirks. And so you run into these type of people all throughout. Not that John MacArthur is any of those, but I'm not surprised to hear people say, he may have been a control freak. Well, yeah, probably, but he certainly was a great teacher. He grew the church, and he brought people to a loving, transformational life with Jesus.
Now, I don't agree with every single line of his doctrine and theology. I'm not as reformed as he is.
No.
But I still, with profit, listen to his preaching, listen to his work. And
sure.
I know, I believe that he has brought many people to faith in Jesus Christ. And for that, we should be eternally grateful.
Absolutely. But now take a look back through a lens. Can we say the same about Jim and Tammy and Jimmy Swaggart and others of that time? No. Once their ministries crashed and burned, that was it. John MacArthur had a lifelong ministry that never crashed and burned. It was never a public falling out with John. Once again, some doctrinal issues here and there, but Calvinist for me. But, it is what it is.
Well, and that's why we need to hold up people like the late Billy Graham, or even his son Franklin Graham. Never a whiff of moral scandal. People may say, "Oh, Franklin is too political and he gets paid too much," but nobody can ever accuse him. I have never heard him accused of abusing his pulpit for personal gain or personal sexual gratification or whatnot. And people used to be cool to taunt Billy Graham about the Billy Graham rule of not being alone with a woman other than your wife.
Yes.
If Jimmy Swaggart had followed that rule, we would have a much different funeral obituary than the ones we're having right now.
Yeah, pretty crazy. Well, all right. Well, you just think about Jerry Falwell's son. He was the dean of Liberty University.
University.
So,
oh my!
I know, pretty sad. Let's talk. Pull out my stories. Patience, people, patience. I run multiple screens over here, and I have to be entertaining and on topic. South African policing. Really? Not an India story? Okay, here. South African policing scandal. Apparently, and I didn't know this, But you can have so much scandal in your organization, you finally reach the attention of the Roman Catholics and the Anglicans, and they say, whoa, wait a minute.
The situation with the African National Congress is destroying South Africa. That's a political statement of mine, but I think it could be borne out by facts. Corruption is the byword. Corruption. We've got Ukraine levels of corruption. We've got
Zimbabwe.
Terrible corruption.
Yeah.
Zimbabwe level. Well, there's nothing left to steal in Zimbabwe, so the corruption's down because all the money's been taken.
Yeah.
But the latest scandal was that a major police official has denounced the police chief for the province of KwaZulu-Natal, which is Durban area, of being in league with criminal gangs, specifically of hindering investigations, halting investigations,
Sure.
stopping murder prosecutions, perverting the course of justice, basically allowing certain criminal. It's like think of the mafia in Chicago in the 1920s under Al Capone. That level of corruption. And a fellow police officer has pointed this out. And the Anglicans and the Catholics, after sort of tiptoeing around this for years about the corruption of the African National Congress and basically picking up a little, yeah, well, that wasn't so good. Yeah, that maybe wasn't so good. Yeah, finding several millions of cash in the president's summer house wasn't, a good look. Finally, Thabo Makgoba and the cardinal, I forget his first, the cardinal in charge of the South African Conference of Bishops, Roman Catholic bishops, have each issued statements saying, look, we've reached the tipping point here. If we can't trust the police, there's nobody left to trust.
Yeah.
The utilities don't work, social services don't work, hospitals don't work. The entire social fabric of South Africa is falling apart. And now the police are just as bad as the gangs. This is it. Now, maybe this is a point that things begin to change, or maybe it's just the last gasp as South Africa goes down the drain.
Well, we get to that point where we have to point out the obvious. Donald Trump did this to the leader of South Africa when he showed up at the White House, asking for handouts, of course. But Donald Trump took the opportunity to say, listen, we don't support this kill the Boer speech we hear. And the South African president says, we don't do that. That's ridiculous. That's rumors. And President Trump had to show him the tape. And at a certain point, the Catholic and Anglican leaders need to show the tapes of what the police are doing. And to be honest and upfront, says, we let you get away with so much and we didn't say anything because it benefited us. This doesn't benefit anybody.
The South African Anglican Church has gone a long way, and it's gone a long way in a wrong direction from its heights under Desmond Tutu and his predecessors of being a voice for the voiceless, fighting apartheid, fighting corruption, now to being part of the corruption culture. The Anglican Inc. had a story about Charles May, the Bishop of Highveld. He's a former dean of Johannesburg or Pretoria. He's a former dean of a major cathedral. Lay groups in his diocese are saying, we're going to bankrupt the diocese and stop all giving because this guy's a crook. And the Anglican Inc. story, it lists all his sins. And the thing is, this has been going on for years, and complaints have been sent to the Archbishop, and it always winds up in the circular file, meaning into the trash. So you've got a crooked bishop who's allegedly adopted the culture of the ruling African National Congress, and the South African bishops aren't willing to police their own. We have complaints about the Bishop of Swaziland, the bishop. We had a story. Remember, Kevin, that story we did about there was going to be an investigation finally of the Bishop of Umzimvubu, and the day before the auditors came, the cathedral burned down and all the records. Oh my!
Oops.
Candle
fell over. Yeah.
Perhaps the South African church's voice would be more meaningful when it addresses corruption and scandal if it cleaned its own ranks out. One of the things I always find ridiculous is people like to tout Thabo Makgoba as possibly the next Archbishop of Canterbury, something really exotic, bringing an telegenic foreigner. Well, he's up to his neck in the Smythe business and sexual and abuse cover-ups. Now, he's never done anything wrong, but he's done everything that Welby has done. Slow walk stuff, ignore stuff, not my job sort of answers. And, that's the last thing the Church of England would need right now. But that's the problem in South Africa. Instead of the church leading the culture, the church is following the culture. And God help the people in South Africa until they get their act together.
Sadly, in the Church of England and other places, the church is leading the culture into the worse, not the better. So let's move on to some stories we missed the follow-ups to. Justin Welby gave an interview last week or the week before that was recorded in video form, and he was asked about why it took him so long to come around to the homosexual orthodoxy. And he said, listen, I was thick.
Yeah, Justin Welby went to the Cambridge Union, which is a student debating society. It's fairly prestigious. And he did a conversation with Justin Welby night. And it was recorded, and it was in May, but it was only released last few weeks. So, the kids had spring vacation and all this and that. But it finally got out into the public eye. And Justin Welby's on an apology tour it serves him so very badly. He said, oh yes, I've talked to my psychotherapist about this. Oh my God, Justin, there's some things we just don't need to know. And one of the things he says, essentially, I was thick in believing traditional Christian doctrine. I was thick in believing the official stance of the Church of England and not being as with it as you hepcat. They say hepcats anymore?
I don't know.
Hipsters, I don't know. Whatever the phrase is, as you teens and young 20s, as you youths here at the Cambridge Union. I think we're almost getting to Joe Biden territory where his wife needs to take him off the stage.
Well, I do appreciate he did not show up in collar, and his demeanor was that of slouched, failed person in the interview. He was not.
He almost looked like one of these. We have this TV show in America called Cops, where they. Usually they're traffic stops in Florida, but whenever they do the interrogation in the lockup room and you have the detective talking to the guy, they all look like this slumped back, half dead, collar open. That's what Justin Welby looked like.
I never believed.
He looked like he's being interrogated by the police and was about to cop out to the liquor store robbery. Oh my God, how the mighty have fallen. Yeah,
well, keep him in your prayers as we should, and pray that, now that he's done this once, the press is going to really love him, and I see more interviews in his future. So, which is sad. Update number 2 that we completely missed. We had mentioned early on when the Calvin Robinson, Steve Wood fiasco broke out, that there are other people that Steve Wood could hold a flashlight to and show that their conduct is wrong as a clergy person in the ACNA, but you wouldn't do that because they're not part of your diocese. So he didn't, obviously. And there's an update to one of the people that we pointed out that should probably have been brought a flashlight to, but I can't remember his name. Because I'm so old. But apparently Bishop Hunter has sent a letter of reprimand, and this priest has posted it on the website of the church. Do you remember who it was? Yeah.
No, I can't. The name will come to me after we're done filming. But it was a Nashville parish.
Yes.
Where the priest had basically voiced support for woke and pride issues. Mm-hmm. And this caused a bit of a stink at the time, and they were taken down. And we asked C4SO for some comments. They never responded. And then it turned out that Bishop Hunter gave an admonition telling this fellow to knock it off. And here's the sadness. Here's the amateur hour press operations. It's released to buddies, so that it goes through social media. Mm-hmm. And so instead of responding to press queries, you have to know somebody who will show you something that you shouldn't be shown, and it'll get out into the world. Yeah. Hey, if you won your operation like that, that's your business. I expect to be taken seriously.
I hope that's not them.
My goodness.
Well,
it basically says that, look, we got caught, so we're going to have to do this so that we should know that we got caught, but go ahead and do it anyway. That's the wink, wink, nod, nod message here. When you're not willing to take public stances on what you believe and don't believe, but hide everything behind the door, and only act after problems arise and people complain, then you're basically giving a license to anybody to do anything until they get caught. There's no direction ahead of time. It's a failure of leadership at C4SO. It's a failure of leadership at the ACNA.
Well, I do want to give credit where credit's due. They did something. In the past, some of these things were really swept under the rug and you never heard anything. But now we know, because it was posted on the website of the church, that there was follow-up, and we appreciate that.
Well, so not to I would never hold the Episcopal Church up as a model of how to do anything. Okay? But there are some things they do well. And that is when a priest is disciplined. Every clergy person in the diocese and the other dioceses, the diocesan offices, get a copy of a statement of this person has been deposed for X, Y, and Z, or this person has been admonished. There's no hiding stuff. You may think that the Episcopal Church is Looney Tunes I agree with you on a lot of this stuff, but at least the way the canons are right now is they're transparent. So unfortunately, you know everything that's going on instead of being hidden. But we had a priest last week. There were two priests in my mailbox who were deposed by the Diocese of Central Florida, both for sexual misconduct. Instead of my hearing whisper, 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 oh, did you hear what happened to so-and-so? It's all out there. It's all out there, and there's no hiding it. And the people in their former parishes were informed that these things happened. It's a much better system than the hidden hiding stuff, or only buddies get to know, or your pals get to know, and I'm doing you a favor by letting you know what's happening.
So we can say that the Episcopal Church is one step up on Jimmy Swaggart Ministries by holding people accountable. Good job. Appreciate that, All right, that's all the stories I have, but I just saw some news breaking here that you and I have talked about this type of stuff in the past. We don't delve into war that much, but now Trump is going to send arms to Ukraine. It's like
I don't
know what to say.
Well, on one hand, one part of my head said, well, it's a good program because he's making the Europeans pay for American arms. Mm-hmm. So we make it and they buy it from us, and we're allowing them to be shipped there. So that's good. What's bad is we're just feeding into this never-ending war, that how many more millions have to be wounded and killed, and well, it's not my mandate to fix that problem.
No, it's not. But we complained before that at a certain point, all you're funding is the death of people. You're not funding war anymore. You're funding the death of soldiers and civilians. And
Kevin, there's a danger here, Kevin.
Uh-oh.
There's a danger here that either
politics.
you or I will pull up. That will pull up Star Trek episodes, the original. And, do you remember when that one Star Trek episode that they went to the planet where they stopped actually having war, but they agreed each side would kill so many others of their own people?
I remember that one.
And there's a danger, Kevin, where we're of an age where Star Trek, there's a geek problem here that might be activated. Don't push that button.
Maru. We're doing the Kobayashi Maru here. So once again, I said at the beginning of the episode, you send emails to AnglicanTV@gmail.com of stories you want us to cover, stories you don't think we know about, because we're busy guys. Well, George is busier than I am. But in my self-retirement here, I'm not on the internet 24 hours a day looking for more news stories. I'm trying to do other things with my life than what I did for 50 years. Swallow myself into a computer screen. Oh, it's horrible, George. I'm Kevin Kallsen.
And I'm George Conger. And you've been watching episode 923 of Anglican Unscripted.